Welcome everybody. Since
Please do it. Free to do it.
Okay, welcome everybody to this CREI seminar. I'm pleased to introduce Professoressa Stefania from the University of Foggia. She will be presenting a paper on financial frictions in the euro area, a Bayesian assessment. The presentation will be recorded so that we will be able to make it available on the CREI website. As we usually do, I think you might have 25 to 30 minutes according to, I don't know what's the timing of your presentation, and then we will open the floor to discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here. And I will discuss this paper, Financial Frictions in the Euro Area, a Bayesian assessment. Let me start by motivating my research, even if I must admit that motivating a paper on financial friction nowadays is not that easy at the end of the day, because I mean, it was evident that during the Great Recession, financial markets played an important role in affecting business cycle fluctuations. And if we look at some financial variables, such as the spread on lending, their behavior was very different during the financial crisis. So if you look at, for example, at the spread, not only in the euro area, but also in the US and the UK, what you can see is that after the failure of the Lehman Brothers, the spread skyrocketed. And then another thing that we could observe is that lending contracted. Of course, these financial variables also had an effect on real variables such as GDP, consumption, investment, and so on. And given this striking evidence, what happened is that in the dynamic stochastic general equilibrium literature, there has been an increasing awareness on the role that financial markets play. I will discuss in more detail what dynamic stochastic general equilibrium model is. I'm sure that someone here in the floor knows them, but not all of you, so I will try to explain which is the basic, let's say, elements of a DSG model, so dynamic stochastic general equilibrium model. And what we could see is that in the DSG literature, financial markets were not very included, and apart from some few contributions in the literature. And the papers that have included financial frictions have microfounded the financial sector in different ways. So, for example, macro foundation of financial frictions dates back, for example, to Stiglitz and Weiss, the problem of adverse selection, which has been also incorporated in a dynamic stochastic general equilibrium model by Cristiano and Keta in 2011. Then there was this influential contribution by Bernanke and Gilchrist in 1999, and other contributions in the literature. But all of them differ in the way financial frictions are microfounded. And please, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me at any time. Okay. The contribution of this paper is double. So on one hand, what I want to see is whether financial frictions are empirically relevant in the euro area. So my question is mainly empirical. And I look at the period between 1980, Q1, and 2008, Q3. So I stopped before the financial crisis because I want to see whether financial frictions are important also in normal times, because I mean, during the financial crisis we expect that financial frictions are empirically relevant. So I want to see what happens in normal times, assume that now we are in crisis time and not the new normality. I mean, there is this discussion about that. And then if they are relevant, I propose two types of microfoundations, and I want to see which of these is favored by the data. In order to answer to these questions, what I want to do is to present first the theoretical part. So in this part I compare three models. The first model is Scienze American Review 2007. This is the standard model for the SG modeling, in the sense that it has quite variety of frictions and shocks, and mainly this model has been found to have desirable empirical properties. And the only fact that the Scienze model encompasses complete financial markets, so the Modigliani-Miller theorem holds, and the way the firm finance itself is not relevant, so does not affect the value of the firms. And then what I want to do, I build, in a Scienze economy, I build a model where financial frictions are modeled as in Bernanke, Getter and Gilchrist. I will explain you how this works, but just to let you know, we have that monitoring the loan applicant is costly in this kind of model BGG, Bernanke, Getter and Gilchrist, and so this drives a wedge between the cost of internal versus external funds. And the third model that I build is within a Scienze economy. I had financial frictions as in the GME paper by Getter and Crowd in 2011, where the source of the financial frictions is the banking sector. And I will show you how it works. The problem is a problem of moral hazard, and so this again drives a spread between lending rates and risk-free rates in the economy. So given these three modeling devices, what I want to do in the empirical part is let the data speak. So I estimate these three models with euro area data during this sample, and then I provide one set of comparison based on the Bayes factor, which is the instrument generally used to compare the different models, different estimated TSG models. I look at business cycle moments, so what I do here is a comparison between the moments in the data and what is generated by the moments generated by the estimated models. I also want to look at the impulse response function because I'm interested to see how the transmission mechanism of the shock is different in the three models, if it is, and actually it is. Okay, because of the constraint of time, I won't be able to go into the detail of the literature. There are models with financial frictions. Actually, the number of papers is increasing nowadays because, of course, there is a request not only from policy institutions but also in academia to see how we can model financial markets within DSG, in DSG models. And this is a very selective related literature. And then there is also an increasing literature using Bayesian estimation of DSG. Again, it started mainly because of this contribution by Scienze, and then there are also other papers estimating DSG models. Some of them estimate models with financial friction, such as Fernandez-Villaverde, Casual, Scandinavian Journal of Economics in 2009. I do an empirical exercise with Jing Yang to estimate the model by Gershon Krali for the UK economy and to look at unconventional monetary policy in this framework. I'm also working, for example, with Franz Metz again in a model with financial frictions in order to see whether indebtedness of firms can explain why recoveries are slower during the 90s. But again, this is just a quick look at the literature. Let's go to the models. Okay, so the dynamic stochastic general equilibrium models are general equilibrium. This means that there are many agents in the economy. And in particular, what I have, there is a building block which is common in the three models, And then there are some aspects that are typical of the SWBGG model, so the Smetzenbauters economy plus financial frictions a la BGG. And then some elements or agents which are peculiar to the SWGK model. So in all the models we have a set of agents which are households, then intermediate good firms, retailers, final good firms, labor unions, labor packers, and policymakers. What do they do? What we have is that households solve a standard maximization problem, so they choose how much they want to consume and what they want to save, and then the supply of labor. Then we have wage and price stickiness. The way to model this price stickiness is to have, for example, in the good market, we have retailers. So the retailers buy the goods from intermediate good firms, and they differentiate them. So they have monopolistic power. But in setting the prices, they are subject to this Calvo process. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but the Calvo process is a very elegant micro-funded way to introduce price stickiness. So firms can adjust prices only when they get a random signal. Otherwise, they keep the price from the last period. And this is a way to introduce price stickiness, the fact that the prices are not flexible, cannot change at any time. And then we have final good firms. What they do, they buy these goods from retailers, they assemble them so that they can sell the final good in a perfectly competitive market. A similar structure also holds for the labor market, so to have wage stickiness, the fact that wages are not perfectly flexible in the economy. And then we have the policymaker. Here is a central bank that sets the nominal interest rate following a Taylor rule. Okay, so this is the equation 5. This is common to all the three models. Other aspects that are common to these models, because I want to compare with this Smetzenbauters model, which is a very influential paper in the literature, there are some frictions. So, for example, habit formation. Habit formation, for those of you who are not familiar with, means that in the households forms habit at the level of the aggregate consumption. So this is a way to introduce smoothness in the response of consumption when we look also at input responses. And then, the standard frictions that have nice empirical properties. Okay, so I also check whether they are relevant or not from an empirical point of view. What we have now, so this is the Smetzenbauters block, okay? And then, in order to have financial markets, I have to change the production side of the economy. In particular, in the SWBGG model, also in the SWGK, there are capital producers, so the production of capital is made by these agents in the economy. And then in the SWGK model, there are also financial intermediaries. So actually, this is something that I really liked of this model, because it really models from a micro-funded way the banking sector. Because in this literature, the banking sector has been neglected for quite a while. And now, let's look at the model. I don't want to show you equations, so I hope that this graph will help to understand how things work.
May I interrupt you?
Yes, please.
I mean, it's a big act of hubris, this family use the plural. I mean, you have a representative household, you have a representative from I would not use the plural. I mean,
okay. Yes. Okay. This is a way in these models. What we use a representative agent. Okay. And of course, this is an assumption in the sense that we are aware that there is heterogeneity in reality, but there are some ways in which we can introduce heterogeneity, and actually I also introduce heterogeneity on the firm side, so firms are heterogeneous in the SWBGG model. But
you fold them up, you fold up the heterogeneity.
Yeah,
into
there are
different
also
ways.
in this literature there are different ways to introduce heterogeneity, so having rule of thumb consumers and other ways. But yeah, in a sense this is a simplifying assumption. I agree with you, sure.
More than, it made you more than simplified the fact, but go ahead.
Yeah, of course I want to defend this model, no, in the sense that it's also introducing heterogeneity is a non-trivial way to solve this model. For example, okay, there are some ways like rule of thumb consumer that you assume that a fraction of households behave in a certain way and a fraction in another, but at the same time have a general equilibrium model which is a dynamic and stochastic with a lot of heterogeneity. Is not, let's say, an easy task. And also, for example, there are also some other contribution in the literature that works on expectation, because I'm in a rational expectation environment. I don't know what's your research interest, but then there are also ways to introduce heterogeneity in the formation of expectation, but also in that case you have strong assumption. So, okay, anyone has a strong assumption, I would say. Anyway. And so in this model there is the represented households that consume, save and supply labor. And then, this is the intertemporal choice, so they deposit money in the financial intermediaries and the financial intermediary just lend to firms. So in this model, SWBGG, financial intermediaries are just the bail. So they transfer funds from households to firms, but they don't play an active role, let's say. And then there are firms that solve two problems. So they solve the standard profit maximization. They choose the optimal quantity of factors for production, and then they stipulate a financial contract because they need to borrow money to finance capital expenditure, and their net worth is not enough, so they need to borrow. Okay. And the problem in this, this is the vernacular and Gilchrist structure, is that there is an agency problem, because firms, when they solve this financial contract, what happens is that the return to capital is subject to an idiosyncratic shock. So this is a way to introduce heterogeneity, I would say, more or less. Okay, a nice way to introduce heterogeneity. So what happens is that there is an idiosyncratic shock that eats the borrower's return, and the lender has to pay a monitoring cost to observe the realization of this idiosyncratic shock. So the lender pays the monitoring cost, but de facto he passes the cost to the borrower. And I'm happy to discuss the micro foundation in detail if you have further questions. And so the cost of external finance is higher than the cost of internal finance, and this is the source of the spread in the economy. And moreover, I just want to discuss equation 1. So R K is the lending rate, R is the risk-free rate, and you can see that the lending rate is a function of the leverage. Actually, this is the inverse of the leverage, so N is net worth, QT, KT plus 1 is total asset, and in particular it can be shown analytically that when the leverage rises, since the divergence of interest between borrowers and lenders is greater, lenders want to be compensated by higher lending rates, so the spread rises. And this is the SWBGG model. What happens in the SWGK? Okay, let me use again this chart. Again, we have households that solve the standard utility maximization problem. And then there are financial intermediaries, but here the balance sheet is explicitly modeled. So we have assets and deposit plus bank capital on the liability side. And then they lend to firms. Okay, in this second part, there is perfect information. Okay, so firms just solve the standard profit maximization problem. The problem of asymmetric information is within the financial intermediaries, because the assumption of this model is that financial intermediaries can divert a fraction of available funds and transfer them back to their family. I was listening, for example, our presentation by Kiyotaki, who uses a similar model, and say, okay, what an assumption that bankers can divert assets. And then he would say, okay, actually, my father was a banker, and I would say that this is not such a strong assumption. Okay. Anyway.
And the representative household is made of bankers and workers, right?
Exactly. Okay, within each household, exactly. Sorry, because I was not. I didn't explain
it's like in
that.
Kiyotaki.
Yeah, exactly. That's the paper, right? So as I was saying, there are bankers and the fraction of bankers and the fraction of workers. And then, since there is a moral hazard problem, there is also an incentive compatibility constraint. In particular, the incentive compatibility constraint is that, from the point of view of the depositor, the gain from diverting assets should be lower than the cost of doing so. So that at the end they won't divert assets. I don't want to discuss again the analytical aspects, but at the end, due to the problem of symmetric information, we have that there is an endogenous balance sheet constraint, so that the quantity of assets in a bank is tied to the bank capital. So in this case, phi t is the bank leverage. Okay, how much time do I have?
10 minutes.
10 minutes? Okay. So let me discuss now. So these are the three models. So I made them as comparable as possible, and then I estimate them. And I use, since I'm using this Messer-Bauter's model, I'm using this Messer-Bauter shocks and circle, and I can discuss afterwards about that if you want. And this is the time that I'm looking at. There are some parameters that are calibrated because they are not identified in the dataset, or because they reproduce some steady-state value or some variable. So, okay, let's say the depreciation rate is very unlikely to be identified, and so I calibrated it, and this is quarterly, okay? So it's 10% depreciation per year. And then what I opted also was to calibrate the financial parameters in order to target some steady-state values of the financial variables. So the steady-state spread, I wanted it to be 150 basis points per year, because this is the value that I found in the data for the euro area during that period. And then the leverage ratio, I target to 2 in the SWBGG model, because this is the leverage of firms. And then I targeted it to 4 because banks are generally more leveraged than firms. But what I do, I also do some robustness exercises to the calibration of the financial.
How do you calibrate them?
So what I do is I want to target a steady-state spread of 150 basis points, because this is the value that I found in, for the data set that I had. And then the leverage ratio is 2. Okay, this value of 2 is quite standard, I would say, in this literature, because we assume that first this is the leverage ratio, but also what I could find, maybe to use data, it was even easier because, access to the data is easier compared to the euro area data, but this is a very close value to what we find in the data. And while for the banks are generally more leveraged than firms, so I opted for a value of 4, but I do robustness exercise then. So then what I do, I change also the leverage from 1.5, I think, to 6 for both firms and banks, and I want to see whether results are robust. Okay, and then I estimated the other parameters. Of course, I'm not going to discuss the estimation of the single parameters because what I would say that more or less they are similar among the three models. So in general, firms change prices every year, while the wage stickiness is lower, so wages are changed every 3 quarters. Let me just put
These are guesses because we know very little about how often firms change prices. I mean,
well, no, I wouldn't say that. I mean, for the euro area, it's quite funny because if you were working in a central bank nowadays, you work on financial frictions, okay? But then if you were working in a central bank before the financial crisis, you were working about price stickiness because there was a network about the price stickiness in the euro area that were producing a huge amount of papers about price stickiness in the euro area because of course this is relevant for policy
without
making.
looking at the microdata, producing an enormous amount of estimates without looking at the microdata ever.
Well, okay. Honestly, I haven't read this all amount of data, 50 papers, at least 50 papers. But another thing that I would say is that another way to look at the price stickiness is also with these Bayesian exercises. Because with Bayesian exercises, I mean, you let the data speak. Actually, the prior are not very tight. And then if there is no price stickiness according to macro data, what we would see is that this first parameter would be about 0.4 or even lower. Okay, so when there are no price stickiness, we have 0.1, but even 0.4 it means that prices change very frequently. So I would say that I mean, from my personal perspective, there is evidence about price stickiness in the euro area. Okay,
No,
but,
I share totally that there is price stickiness. The fact that the way it is calculated is voodoo. I mean, the intuition that there is price stickiness is a sound one. I mean, then the way it is obtained is via looking at macro data and inferring back on what is the implied price stickiness instead of going to see the firm how often they change the prices. This is the only thing that they don't do. I would start from there. I mean.
yeah, even if actually, okay, there is just a study that I've looked at, is that they look, for example, even at supermarkets, prices at supermarkets, how often they change prices, how often prices revert back. So, of course, I mean, I'm not an expert about these micro studies, but
there is one good study of the European Central Bank comparative across countries.
Yeah, I'm sure there are many. Yeah, I'm sure of this. Okay, and okay, let me just discuss this parameter. This parameter is present only in the SWBGG model, and it is the elasticity of external finance premium with respect to the leverage position of firms. So, roughly speaking, if this parameter is equal to 0, this means that there are no frictions at all. Indeed, this is a way to nest the SWBGG model with a model without financial frictions. And I was using a uniform distribution, so and what I get is that this parameter, if you kind of look at it, is 0.069, and these are the 95% confidence interval. So this is different from 0, and I can take this as a first piece of evidence in favor of a model with financial frictions in the euro area. So I won't discuss about the estimation of this, but let me go directly to the bias factor. So what we do is when we have these different models, we compare the marginal likelihood, which provides an indication of the overall likelihood of the model given the data. So this is the marginal likelihood, and let me just discuss these values. The log likelihood for Smessen-Walters, SWBGG and SWGK, what we can see is that the most likely, by looking at the log likelihood, is the SWGK model. And then second in ranking is the SWBGG, and then we have the SW. So SWGK wins the race. It means that according to the data, it is the model that is more reasonable for this given data set. And then what I can conclude is that if we compare models with financial frictions with a model where the Modigliani-Miller theorem holds, we have the models with financial frictions are always preferred, even in normal times, okay? And then this model does a better job.
Is there any difference, excuse me, dividing the data set between pre and post prices?
Actually, I haven't checked. I haven't checked if there is any difference. The fact is that, okay,